I am the SVP of Innovation at the Mars Agency, and admittedly, I have a really cool job. I get to track emerging technology every day and find ways to apply it to make shopping and customer experiences better. Voice is one of those technologies that we've been tracking on our team for close to 2 years now. And so what I'm going to spend roughly the next 45 minutes doing is talking to you guys about how we're applying it in a shopping and customer experience context. Does that sound good? Yes, all right. So now, if you're anything like me, you're a huge Mel Brooks fan. You may have thought to yourself when you were a teenager, wouldn't it be awesome if I could work in a reference to one of his movies during a professional presentation? So high five to my 13-year-old self. And you'll remember this scene from the movie Spaceballs. So here we've got Dark Helmet, played by Rick Moranis. He and his henchmen are chasing Lone Star and Barf through the galaxy. And Dark Helmet turns to Colonel Sanders and says, "Light speed is too slow. We'll have to go right to ludicrous speed." So now I reference this not because I want to launch into a detailed discussion or review of Spaceballs, though, as I said, it would be awesome, because I think it provides a really nice metaphor for what's happening in voice. So from where I stand, voice has reached what we're calling ludicrous hype level. And that's evidenced by a number of things. There was a Super Bowl commercial this year for Amazon Alexa. Did everybody see it? Lots of star power, certainly. Just recently, within the last couple of months, JP Morgan named VaynerMedia. Does anybody here work with VaynerMedia out of New York and elsewhere? They named them their voice agency of record. That's a term that didn't exist as recently as maybe 2 months ago. And probably the best indicator that voice is at ludicrous hype level is in that it's depicted by the image at the bottom there. And it's this idea that it was actually spoofed on SNL. So did folks see the Alexa Silver spoof at the end of last year? Again, I think that that's how you know that you've arrived as a technology or as a company, is when SNL starts to spoof you. To further emphasize this point, maybe to add an academic lens to it, though, what we did was we looked at a report that Gartner puts out every year. In 2017, it's their hype cycle report. And basically what they do is they rate different technologies along this hype curve. Here we've got it kind of superimposed on top of the technology adoption curve. And what we found was that voice and virtual assistants is the second most hyped technology of 2017, just behind connected home. But you can see right here as it's kind of tracking along that curve that voice is at what they call the peak of inflated expectations. So you really can't get much more hyped than that. So we start to peel back the onion a little bit, though, and as my team started to research a little bit about what's happening in this space, what we find is that voice is actually more than just buzz. So just some key statistics to validate that this is more than just hype that's being spoofed by Saturday Night Live. 50 million voice-first devices in circulation in the US today. It's about 12% penetration. I submitted this presentation to the folks at Supplier Community a week ago, and there's already a new report that's projecting that within the next 4 years, so by 2022, that penetration number will be at 55%, which is pretty insane. And then the other thing I want to point your attention to is searches. So again, we've got a lot of these speakers and other voice-first devices that are coming into the market, but today, in 2018, there are over 1 billion voice searches that are that are being conducted or queried by consumers on a monthly basis. And the projection is that in 2 years, by 2020, 50% of all searches are going to be conducted by voice. It's a huge, huge number. So again, more than just buzz. To kind of further emphasize that point, you know, the way that we think about it is that voice is a lasting trend as opposed to a fleeting fad. So here we've got, and I know that this might be blasphemous to reference this guy, Jeff Bezos, here in Walmart's backyard, but the point really helped me kind of strengthen my narrative here, so I'm going to go with it. So this is Bezos at Amazon's Q4 earnings call. So on February 1st, basically what he said was, Alexa surpassed all of our expectations, all of our wildest dreams, and we're doubling down on Alexa and on voice heading into 2018. So that's a pretty bold proclamation by a pretty influential person. And then further, this is a quote from an e-commerce partner of ours, Keith Anderson at Profitero. They're an e-commerce consultancy based out of Boston. And the gist of kind of this sea of words up on the slide here is that he's seen a lot of technology in the last 15 years that has been described as game-changing, but he thinks that voice of all those technologies is the most game-changing and is going to have the most pervasive impact on consumers, on the way that we behave, and just on culture generally. So again, validation that voice is a lasting trend and not a fleeting fad. So to kind of close the loop on that point, if you go back to the hype cycle and you go back to the technology adoption curve, what we're projecting is that voice is going to kind of come down from that peak of hype where it is now. It's going to cross the chasm. It's going to gain early majority and late majority adoption. And it's going to be one of those technologies that survives and thrives into the future. And it's going to be something that all of us are using on a regular basis. Why do we think that? So I'm going to try to circle this back to the theme of today, which is customer experience. We think that voice is one of these persistent technologies that is going to survive and thrive for many reasons, but most importantly, that it provides really simply the best user experience. I'm going to read this quote for you because I think it's really interesting and provocative. This is from Dwayne Forrester at a company called Yext in a report that they published at the beginning of the year. And what he says is that it's just so much easier to ask for something out loud than it is to type. Believe it or not, people can be lazy at times, and voice search feeds into this behavior perfectly. So voice is easy, it's seamless, it's barrier-free. It doesn't require me to take a device out of my pocket or to have it in front of me and point and click or swipe. All I have to do is have a natural conversation, and I can get access to the content that I want. And again, I think that it's that seamless user experience that is ultimately going to help voice, as we said, survive and thrive. So I get asked this question a lot. So people say, that's fantastic, I believe you, but talk to me about the application and talk to me about the relevance for me. So what we'll start with is that what you're thinking is probably true. Voice today is primarily used for what we're describing as utilitarian tasks. So I use voice, or I use an an Echo device in my home or a Google Home device in my office to do things like check the weather, play music. I control smart devices in my home, so I ask my Amazon Echo to turn up the temperature on my Nest thermostat, check my calendar appointments, so on and so forth. But what's really interesting for me as the innovation lead at a shopper marketing agency is that we're increasingly seeing these shopping and customer experience use cases. So, as you start to look at the data and dive in a little bit deeper, what we're finding first, you can see this up at the top here, is that 1 in 5 consumers who have a voice-first device have made a purchase through their Echo or their Google Home or whatever that device may be. So they've already done it, and then another third are planning to do it in the next year. And then again, just to kind of demonstrate how fast the space is changing, I saw another report that was published on Monday that projected that voice commerce today is at $2 billion, but within the next 4 years, it's actually going to be $40 billion. So a 20-fold increase in voice-first commerce and voice-first purchases. So a huge application for shopping. And then again, just a little bit of additional validation here. So what you're seeing on the right is a chart from a survey that eMarketer produced. And what they asked consumers in both the UK and the US is, what are the product categories that you would be interested in buying via voice? And lucky for us in the room, you can see that a lot of our categories are up here. So it's things like consumer electronics. I wish I had one of those laser pointers right now. It's things like grocery, food and beverage, personal care, so on and so forth. So this isn't one of those technologies that's going to be relevant for a very small number of categories that are high involvement, maybe durable, and very, very similar to what we saw with e-commerce in the very early stages of that renaissance. We're seeing that there's immediate and real application for the categories that we care about. So that's really interesting, again, particularly for us as shopper marketers, because I think it begs a really important question, which is who inside of our organizations should own voice? We fight this fight every day. So I think the default answer in most retail and brand organizations, or even across the agency landscape, is this is digital, so it belongs either with the brand team or the digital team. Easy answer. We're done, and we're going to go assign responsibility for this to those people. But I think that, as you can see, as we have these increasing use cases and applications for voice in shopping and at retail, We're making the argument that at the very least, it's shopper marketers inside of brand organizations, it's shopper marketer agencies that should have a seat at the table as we start to have the discussion around voice. And better yet, I think that we can make the case that we should be the owners of these activities because they have such a direct impact on how people find our products, how they select them, and ultimately how they buy them. So the rest of the presentation, if we all believe that, and do I maybe see some heads nodding? Believe that as shopper marketers we can own this. The rest of the presentation is focused on how we play and win. So I'm just going to take you through a handful of key considerations that you can start to think about as we ask the question, like, what does it look like for us to get into voice? So we're going to talk about form factors and platforms, engagement opportunities for brands and retailers, and best-in-class examples. So we'll start with the form factors and platforms, because this is a question that we get all the time. To start, as you guys all probably know well, there's a wide universe of options in this ecosystem. Everybody from Amazon and IBM down through to Google and Microsoft are starting to make offerings available in this space. You see Apple in the lower left-hand corner. So Siri has been a platform that we've all been familiar with for many years now. On February 9th, Apple just launched their first smart speaker into the market called HomePod. Facebook is coming to market in May with a product called Facebook Portal, That's an Amazon Echo Show competitor, so that'll have a screen that's voice-enabled. So when you look across that universe, the data here is actually really interesting because, and I was actually very surprised by this, although maybe I shouldn't have been. I'm just so kind of predisposed to think that, when I think voice, to think about smart speakers. So when you actually look at it, 46% of Americans are using a digital voice assistant, and the majority of them are accessing a voice service via their smartphone. So it's actually not a standalone speaker device. And so as a result of that, what you're seeing is actually the share leaders in voice today are Google, Samsung, and Apple. Amazon is in this case, I think they're a distant fourth. I'm having a hard time reading that chart. And it's not surprising because Google has equipped all of their Android devices to be voice enabled, similarly with Samsung and Bixby, and then Apple with Siri. The problem is we as brands and retailers and shopper marketers, as we start to think about this, is that the functionality from a mobile standpoint, or at least the ability for us to engage and start to create experiences in voice, is actually relatively limited. So the conclusion that we came to is that the main battleground right now is actually these smart speakers. And as I said, the projection from this latest report is actually that 55% of households will have smart speakers. So I think that the data on this page is going to start to shift. But again, for now, we're talking about an Amazon versus Google battle. So again, smart speakers is the battleground. Amazon's got the majority of the market share at 68%, Google Home at 24%, and then everybody else that was on that provider map has 8%. So Amazon versus Google, but more accurately, what we're really talking about here is Amazon versus Walmart and maybe secondarily Target. So Walmart makes the announcement last year that they're getting into bed with Google, making hundreds of thousands of products available on Google Express and therefore on Google Home, and they're going to take Amazon on. They're going to take on Amazon head on. How about that? In this voice shopping race, or arms race, if you will. So that's what we're seeing from a platform standpoint. The next question, once you've decided that your resources need to be primarily allocated to Amazon Alexa and Google Assistant, is what are the opportunities for me as a brand or a retailer to engage? And so we've got 4 opportunities that I want to talk through here. So the first is voice search optimization, or what we're calling, or the industry is calling, VSEO. And I want to read this quote because I think it does a good job of setting up what the opportunity is. So again, from Dwayne Forrester at Yext, unlike traditional web-based search, where many results are displayed as a list, encouraging exploration, engagement, and choice, voice search is all about the one best answer. This means the pressure has never been greater for you to get your house in order, to optimize correctly, and to employ every option you can to secure an engine's trust. So when you perform a voice search, instead of getting a list of results or product recommendations back, better yet, instead of getting a list, you actually get one return. So as the quote suggests here, it's really important to be in that top search position. And there are some things that you can do as a brand that don't involve money or a lot of money or paid advertising, which we'll talk about in a second, to improve your chances of being that first result at the top of the list. So I'm going to use Amazon as a proxy here just because there's a little bit more intelligence around how you can improve your Amazon ranking on voice. So these are eye charts, but the one up at the top, essentially what that says is that the most reliable way to get to the top of that list is to be what Amazon calls an Amazon's choice product. So Amazon has designated across categories various products as Amazon's choice. And effectively, the way that you impact that is you have to make sure that your products are Prime eligible. You have to make sure that they are highly reviewed and rated, that they're well priced, that they're in stock. The second best way to get to the top of that list is to make sure that you are a top search result. And generally, one of the best ways to do that is to optimize your content, your product page content. So I think this is this is a very fitting discussion following JP and Frank from Walmart. But there are ways to optimize your product content for voice search. So in the chart at the bottom, what we're seeing is that voice searches tend to be very different from text-based searches. They're longer tail, they contain more words. And so I think as we're thinking about how to write product content for the e-commerce environment, we need to start thinking about not just how to optimize for web-based searches, but also for voice searches. So that's the first opportunity. The second has been a little bit controversial lately, and it's paid ads. So I'm going to use the thumbs up and thumbs down emojis here to kind of tell the story of paid advertising in the voice space. So last spring, Amazon made a proclamation that they weren't going to allow any third-party ads on the Alexa platform, verbatim. So it was relatively straightforward. So that's last spring, 2017, and now we've got the thumbs up. So in January of 2018, there was a headline that was kind of blasted across all of the major publications, and it was this announcement that Amazon has big plans for Alexa, and its ads in 2018, and it's discussing with P&G, Clorox, and others. I think Unilever was the other manufacturer that was referenced in that story, and they said this stuff is coming. So we, as an agency, got really excited, and we immediately called our Amazon Alexa rep and said, how do we participate in this pilot? We want in, our clients want in. And this is actually an excerpt from the email that she sent me about 2.5 minutes later, and I'll read it for you guys. She says, hey, unfortunately, the official word from Alexa PR is, this is a factually inaccurate story. We do not currently allow advertising in Alexa and do not have plans to do so in the future. And then in a follow-up conversation that I had with her later that day, what she said was, this is fake news, which I found very funny. So thumbs down on paid ads until further notice from Amazon, or as far as we know from Google on the Assistant platform. There are no paid advertising opportunities for brands. There are some workarounds that we discovered that kind of naturally. So if you guys listen, for example, to podcasts on your Google Home or Amazon Echo device, the streaming ads inside of those podcasts, or even on your streaming music services like Spotify and Pandora, will actually play. So again, a little bit of a workaround there, paid audio ads. Third opportunity is voice offers or deals. And again, we'll use Amazon as a proxy here because their platform is a little bit more developed from this standpoint. So Amazon has an offering that they make available to brands called Alexa Shopping Deals. It's very simple. As a consumer, all you have to do is ask Alexa, as I'm thinking about it, I have my device over there and it's not responding, so we're going to see if that works. But you ask her what her deals are, and then she will read them out to you. You can tell her which ones you're interested in and clip them to your cart. The graph down at the bottom is actually excerpted from a report that the guys at Profitero did on voice. And what this shows is an Alexa deal that Mentos ran last year, and shows that during the time that the offer was available, they saw a pretty sizable sales lift. And then I don't know if you can catch just the tail end of that thing, but not only did they see a sales spike during the offer period, but they saw kind of a sustained lift going forward. So it works, which is really exciting. Last opportunity is branded voice apps. So in Amazon parlance, they call this they call these branded apps skills. In the Google ecosystem, they call them actions. And a couple of charts here just to show you kind of the the growth and the prominence of these branded voice apps, and I'll explain in just a second how they work. Top chart is holiday time 2017. Blue line is Alexa, red line is Google, and you can see almost 1,500% growth in third-party apps being used, which is really tremendous. And then bottom chart shows the number of voice apps in the Alexa Skills Store, the Google Actions Store, and the Microsoft Cortana Skills Store. This was June 2017, and just to give you a sense for how fast, again, this stuff is growing. Again, I submitted this presentation last week. There were 25,000 skills in the Alexa Skills Store. I just read an article today that said it's up to 30,000. So just huge growth. Google's a little bit behind just because, again, their platform isn't as sophisticated and isn't as robust right now. But we expect, the number of Google actions, probably not just to grow proportionately, but probably to exceed the growth of Alexa skills. I think, we're going to see a slowdown in the growth of the number of Alexa skills in the store. I don't think that Google's necessarily going to catch up, but I think similar to what we see with, or what we saw, a handful of years ago, where companies started building mobile applications first for iOS and then for Android. I think we're going to see a similar pattern for these branded voice apps. The way that they work is relatively simple. Has anybody used a skill on Alexa, a branded skill, or an action on Google? So again, think about these as the equivalent of a mobile app, but for voice. So brands can create these self-contained branded experiences. And the way they work is really simple. So you're going to hear about the skill as a consumer through paid media, or just you're going to discover it organically on the Amazon Skills Store. Step one. Step two, and actually there were some updates made to the platform on Alexa that make this step. They make this step kind of moot at this point. But the idea is that what you used to do is you would tell your Alexa device, Alexa, enable the Eucerin skincare skill, and she would basically, that's the equivalent of downloading it from the App Store. And then the third step is just to ask Alexa either to open the skill, so Alexa, open Eucerin skincare, which she might do now, sorry. I can see her lighting up. Or you can deep link into a particular path inside of that skill. So in this case, we would say, I'm not going to use her name, but lady, ask Eucerin Skincare for a product recommendation. So very simple. Make sense? All right, so now we're going to talk about some best-in-class examples of skills, because this is really the primary way that brands and retailers are engaging on the platforms right now. So when we think, again, through a shopper lens about these skills or actions, we've grouped the best-in-class examples into 4 buckets. So inspiration, education, selection, and ordering. We're going to start with inspiration. A couple of examples here. Campbell's is a client of ours. Full disclosure, we did not build their skill. They've created a Campbell's Kitchen skill that works really beautifully on Amazon Echo Show with the screen. A lot of folks use these devices in their kitchens, as a report recently uncovered. And it's really simple. A lot like their Campbell's Kitchen web and mobile properties. The Campbell's Kitchen skill allows people to search for recipes and then gives them step-by-step instructions for how to create those recipes. Excuse me. And then similarly, Diageo in the UK launched a skill that they called The Bar, and it's a very similar concept. You can search for cocktail recipes, and then while you're mixing that cocktail, get step-by-step instructions for how to make it. So that's inspiration. We move to education next. You can see kind of a common theme here with alcohol. I am not an alcoholic. I just happen to find these examples, and they happen to be very good. So Johnny Walker has a skill that is primarily oriented around educating consumers about all of the various products and labels in their portfolio. So you can do a whiskey tasting, you can do a whiskey 101, and again, learn about the difference between red label, black label, blue label, et cetera. And then the other example that we've got over, I suppose if you guys are facing the screen, it's to the right. It's from Unilever, and they have a content platform that they call Cleanopedia that they've extended into the voice space. And again, it's very simple. It's meant to educate consumers on the best way to solve particular problems. So if I have a grass stain on my blue jeans, I ask Cleanopedia how I remove a grass stain from my blue jeans, it's going to tell me and then give me a Unilever product recommendation to solve it. Next bucket is selection. We're going to come back to the user and skill in just a second because we happen to know that one very well. But Userin built what is, as far as we can tell, the first true product selection skill in the Alexa Skills Store. And the gist, apart from offering some skincare tips, is that it allows users to answer a handful of very basic questions about their needs and skincare conditions, and then we'll guide them to the right product. And then not long after we launched that in October, of 2017, Estee Lauder announced that they were releasing a skill in the Google Actions Store. So theirs is called the Nighttime Assistant and provides a very similar capability. And then lastly, ordering. This is interesting. You'll notice that the two examples here are not traditional CPG. They're not traditional mass retail. We're talking mainly about QSR. So this is Domino's and Starbucks. Both offer a skill that allows users to order their favorite pizza, their easy order for Domino's, or their saved order for Starbucks. And I think part of the reason here is, and this is really interesting, and it's a quirk that we discovered very quickly, when we built the user and skill, naturally we wanted to make a product recommendation and then allow a user of this skill to add that item to their Amazon shopping cart. And funny enough, for a retail-first platform, Alexa doesn't enable that cart integration inside a third-party branded skills, so we've had to work out some workarounds. But in any event, these are the two examples here, and again, these are two brands that have built skills that enable people to declare what they want and then put items in their basket. And before we start to wind down here and we talk about best-in-class examples, I want to give you guys a glimpse of the future. So my team and I came up with a concept after we started building skills for the at-home environment. We asked the question, what happens if we take voice and we put it in a brick-and-mortar retail environment and we assist the shopping experience that way? What does that look like? So on February 1st, we launched an experience at a boutique wine and spirits store in New York City called Bottle Rocket, where we put a whiskey selector, a voice-powered whiskey selector in brick-and-mortar retail, and this is what it looks like.
Alexa, open Bottle Genius.
Hi there, I'm the Bottle Genius, and I'm here to help you find the perfect bottle of whiskey at Bottle Rocket. But first, are you looking for a gift? Something similar to your favorite, or something different?
A gift.
Nice. Whiskey makes an awesome gift. So, who is this gift for?
My dad.
Tipping a glass to family. Love it. Are you thinking something classic, or a craft whiskey?
Craft whiskey, please.
So, how big of an impression are you looking to make? Give me a target price to shoot at.
80, please.
Sweet. I narrowed it down to some top choices. Whistle Pig Farm Stock Rye Whiskey. Big and brawny 100% rye bottled at 100 proof. Broycullen Distilling Project #1 Bourbon Whiskey with a high ratio of barley and rye. Hill Rock Solera Aged Bourbon Whiskey. A hugely complex and warming whiskey with layers upon layers of aromas and flavors. Would you like more information about your choices?
No, thank you.
Thanks for hanging out. Let's hope that the person getting this gift lets you have a sip or two. Come back and visit the Bottle Genius soon.
So that's super cool, right? And again, I think we truly believe that voice is going to be like the killer shopping interface of the future, out of the home, in the store, and kind of across channels. So we're really excited about that. If you happen to find yourself in New York City between now and March 31st, Bottle Rocket is at 19 West, let me try that again, 5 West 19th Street, between 5th and 6th. So go check it out. It's really awesome. So we're going to wrap with a case study. I mentioned Userin Skincare. This is a skill that we built and launched for our clients at Beiersdorf in 2017. We ended up building them two things, actually, which is kind of interesting. We built them the master skill, so that's kind of what I've been talking about. It's an experience that is fully branded and that you can launch just with a very simple invocation. We ended up, through the process of building that master skill, doing for them is also building a companion, what Amazon calls a flash briefing skill. So one of the features of Alexa, if you guys are not familiar, is that you can create a flash briefing. So every morning I wake up and I ask my Echo device, what's my flash briefing, and it'll tell me the weather. It'll read me my NPR news briefing, and then as consumers are adding the Eucerin flash briefing to their rotation, I suppose, they can get a Eucerin skincare tip right out. And so again, like I said, it's a product selector primarily, and then we're also offering skincare tips. I'm going to see if this works. So I'm presenting next week at the Path to Purchase in Chicago. I was supposed to co-present with our client, Rob. I'm going to butcher his last name, so we'll call him Rob C. And Rob's wife is pregnant and due with their second child next week when we're supposed to present. So Rob's not going to be there. So what we did was we built an Alexa skill that allows me to interview Rob. So what I'm going to try to do, we've got the Echo Dot here, which isn't super loud. Can we turn up the volume on the mic? So we're going to see if this works. I realize that I run a pretty big risk by trying this technology live in a kind of an unstructured environment, but we're going to see if it works. So you guys let me know if you can hear this. If not, we'll just scrap it. So I'm going to look at my team right here. Alexa, ask client Rob why he built the skill. It's not working. Let me try it one more time. Alexa, ask client Rob why he built. It's going to work. All right, well, so in any event, the way that it's supposed to work, and it was working earlier, is we recorded an interview with Rob, and he answered these questions for us. And I'll give you guys just the quick synopsis here. So the reason that Eucerin decided to build this skill is because they felt like it solved a really clear shopper need. They knew that when people were getting ready to buy in this category, it's overwhelming. There's not a tremendous amount of... That's why it didn't work. Okay, fair enough. It was kind of hard to hear anyway. But in any event, so they started with a shopper insight, they started with a shopper problem, and then decided that, again, they would leverage this emerging channel to deliver a really great shopping experience. So that's the gist of why he built. As far as his expectations are concerned, I think that this is really important because, as we said at the beginning, there's a lot of hype around voice and there is some meat to back it up, but I don't think that we're going to see the real growth and that it's going to hit its tipping point from an adoption standpoint for at least a couple of years. But so what Rob says in his interview is that his expectations going in weren't that this was going to be a cure-all, a panacea, major sales driver. His expectations were going to be that we'd launch this thing and that we'd test and learn, that we glean these really amazing insights and learnings that would help us evolve the skill over a period of time. And the other thing that he talks about, and this probably bleeds into advice for other brands, is that he had buy-off and alignment on that approach up and down the organization before we ever built anything. So interestingly, we're measuring the skill very, very closely. It's been in market since October of 2017, and the engagement with the skill has been good. We're seeing, to be fully transparent, hundreds of users right now, not thousands or tens of thousands of users, but the data that we're getting back, the insight that we're able to glean from people's experiences with this skill has been invaluable. And again, it's going to shape what the experience looks like next year, and it's also influencing other parts of their business. And then lastly, he talks about advice for other brands, and the gist of that is you have to have great partners cross-functionally in your organization and outside. So we worked very closely, in this case, with the Amazon team, but we're working very closely with the Google Assistant team on a handful of other projects. So it's that collaboration, cross-functionally inside and outside of your organization. And the other thing that he says is just have fun with it and kind of roll with the punches. So that takes me to my last slide, which is my key takeaways, not Rob's key takeaways. And I've got 4. So the first is start now, and I can't emphasize this enough. So the analogy that we like to use is think about where CPG e-commerce was maybe 5 years ago. So we had a lot of clients, and I think we were probably in this camp too, that thought the scale's not big enough to warrant a really meaningful investment in the space. And now here we are 5 years later, and if you look at share leaders in various categories, the reality is that online share leaders generally aren't the companies that are the offline share leaders. So if you look at beverage, for example, a company like Bai is an Amazon superstar. And that's because, one, they're kind of a digital native company to begin with, but out of the gate, they invested in great content in e-commerce. They invested in media to drive to their detail pages. They accelerated sales really quickly, and now they've got, I don't want to say an insurmountable head start, but it's pretty close, and we believe the same is going to be true with voice. If you don't start now, if you don't create a footprint, if you don't make shoppers aware that your products are available and that you can provide great experiences through voice, you're going to be left behind in a handful of years. The second, and this relates particularly to skill building, is to be purposeful and provide utility. So I mentioned with Eucerin that we didn't start by saying we want to build a skill or an action. What we said was we've got a problem to solve. We've got to make an experience better for shoppers. And once we landed on the solution there, it was really natural for us to extend that solution into voice. So again, I can't emphasize that enough. Don't build a skill just for skill's sake, but do it because you're providing real value and real utility for shoppers. I'll go back to the middle of the presentation for this third point. In order to succeed, there needs to be a really close collaboration between brand and shopper. This isn't good, you're not going to have a successful presence and activation in voice if it's just the brand team or just the digital team that is taking the reins on these types of initiatives. There's got to be close collaboration between brand and shopper because, as we said, so many of the use cases that we're seeing in voice are starting to shift toward shopping. And then lastly, and I realize that this one comes out of left field a little bit. I've spent 45 minutes or so talking about voice, but when we take a step back, what we talk about more broadly is conversational commerce, artificially intelligent driven conversational commerce. And that can include these voice first experiences that we're talking about, but can also include things like chatbots that we're seeing pop up on text message and SMS and Facebook Messenger and so on and so forth. So when we start to think about building solutions for voice, let's take that step back. Let's think about conversational commerce and how these experiences play across a couple of different channels. And I think that we'll be successful. So that's all I've got. Thank you very much for your time. And I'd love to take some questions. Questions, anybody?
Hello. Oh, yes. You were talking about conversational commerce at the very end there. Is there any, is it going, do you see in the future that there will be special voice commands that will definitely make something an actual purchase? Because I get concerned, it's is it gonna am I gonna get accidentally 1,000 bottles of Eucerin, shipped to my door? Is there some kind of slippery slope, unfortunate thing that's going to happen? Or do you think that it'll be some kind of new vernacular that's going to, because, hey Siri, people kind of adopted that.
Right.
Do you foresee it becoming that kind of a thing? Or is it going to be more integrated into your life to where it'll be easily just more conversational rather than command? Does that make sense? My question? Or how do you see it moving forward?
Yeah, no, I think so. Did you ever see, right after Amazon bought Whole Foods, there was a meme that was going around that just was Bezos says, Alexa, buy something from Whole Foods. I can't remember what it was. And Alexa responds back, buying Whole Foods. There are safeguards in place to prevent that from happening. So you're going to have to confirm and effectively double opt in to do some of that kind of stuff. And what's actually funny is I actually think that the risk of those types of things happening in voice is lower than it is with something like a dash button or the equivalent of a dash button, where literally I don't have any kids, but my 5-year-old could go up and hit the button and order 24 packs of Charmin toilet paper, whatever it is. But no, I think that as the space evolves, we'll continue to mitigate those types of problems, and that it truly will become a little bit more conversational. The other thing that we're finding, again, I keep using Amazon as a proxy, so excuse me, but I think this goes for all these other platforms, is that these platforms will get smarter over time, and they're going to continue to understand your preferences, so that when I ask Alexa or Google Assistant to buy toilet paper, it might, whereas for the first handful of transactions, it's going to give me an Amazon's Choice product or, a highly ranked search product. It'll know that in the last 6 months, I ordered Charmin 24-pack 3 times, and it will start to automatically suggest those types of products. So it'll take into account my past purchase history and things like that. So it's definitely going to get better and more seamless.
Great presentation. I just had a question. So Fern, in her earlier presentation, mentioned that 73% of shoppers are deal trained. 66% of those shoppers are also going to several websites or retail locations. And as I think about voice as a value consumer, I think to myself, well, hey, order a pizza through voice automation. I just feel, what are manufacturers doing in order to still have that value proposition, knowing that they're getting the best deal? And all right, thank you.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah.
Now it works.
Yeah. I guess what are manufacturers in the industry doing to combat that, knowing that there are still customers out there who are looking for the best value in the market?
Yeah, it's really interesting, because I think when you talk about like a pure shopping use case where all I'm doing is asking the device to buy pizza or toilet paper or a can of soup or whatever it is, there's really like a commoditization that's happening as part of that experience. And to be really candid, I don't know that there's a way around that. I think where brands can create experiences and play to shoppers' emotions and build attachment, like Fern talked about, is through branded skills and branded actions and things like that. I also think that, again, as Frank and JP talked about, content is going to be hugely important. So when I ask Alexa to add a product to my list or to buy a particular product, before she does that, I can ask for more information. So I think the brands can start to, as we said, optimize their product listings for the voice environment and make sure that story is coming through in a really compelling way.
I'd love to add to that. I think there's this psychology of choice, so when I want to buy whatever toilet paper I then want to know, well, what's the next best one, or where is it cheapest? And I think, as it develops, it's going to have to build into that choice. No one's going to be happy to just have it say, here's the top thing that came up, and I go, oh, okay, great, I'll buy that. You want to have, when you buy, you are comparing things. So I'm going to guess that how the conversational commerce is going to develop in that way.
Cool. Anybody else?
So like right now, all of this is very cool, but it seems very parameter supplier driven, right? Which isn't conversational at all, right? Because I'm not going to sit at home and I'm going to be like, hey, what's Siri, Apple, or whatever, what's the best skincare product for me? I'm going to have basic questions like, hey, what's the difference between, skincare is terrible because it's not my thing, but we've talked about this within electronics, right? I mean, you were in the room when I was like, hey, what's the difference between 4K and UHD?
Sure.
And that thing couldn't tell me, right? And I think as we get closer to, you talked about it being like inspirational, educational, whatever, who is the onus on to get a seamless experience? Because if I have a basic question, I want to understand the difference between technology A and technology B, and I'm going to use voice rather than typing that question into Google. Like, how do I trust what's coming? Because if then a Samsung branded skill comes up and starts feeding me Samsung branded electronic stuff, I get that you're trying to sell me Samsung. I'm trying to understand the difference between technology A and technology B, and like I guess my question is like, where is that line drawn between, hey, this is educational or informational, and you're trying to make a sale?
Right.
Like, who owns that responsibility? Is that the retailer? Is that the brand? To get truly conversational, like digital assistants, rather than a sales pitch?
Yep. It's a great question. I don't know that I have a silver bullet answer, but I have a couple of thoughts. I guess they're not diametrically opposed, but they're close. So on the one hand, what I'll say is I think it's incumbent on brands and retailers, and a lot of them do this really well in the digital space now, but to create really great category level objective content and put that out on the internet. So it's incumbent on Samsung to create widely available content that explains to people what the difference between 4K and whatever the other protocol is, and do that in a way that, again, is truly objective and isn't promoting a brand agenda. Now in the voice space, that's really, it's actually really difficult, right? Because we can surface that content, but if you're online and you type in difference between 4K and whatever it is, and the top search result happens to live on a Samsung brand page, you've got that branding context there, and you're going to know in the back of your head, oh, Samsung, that's really interesting. In voice, it's a little bit more difficult to do that. But I do think it's incumbent on brands and retailers to start creating that content that lives out in the world that can be surfaced as part of a voice query. And then I think the other thing that I would say is it's going to be really important for brands to create such amazing branded experiences in voice that people can't help but say, I gotta go to the Eucerin skincare skill to get my product recommendation. So if you think again about something like Campbell's Kitchen, there are people who when they're looking for a recipe, default to Campbell's Kitchen and not all recipes or Tasty or whatever it is. And I think that it's going to be really important for brands to create that type of value, that type of utility, so that people have like no choice but to go to their platforms. If that makes sense.
Or maybe brands could partner, thinking of the KC thing, right? You partner with other brands so you have a caregiver skill, where it's not a branded skill. And then I open that, ask questions about what it's like to be a caregiver, and then that could take me to other branded skills. That could be pretty cool too.
So that leads me to a follow-up question then. Are skills as a subset of conversational or voice technology, is that a temporary stopgap measure, right? And I'll give you an example. I've been re-listening to like an old series of podcasts, and it's interesting right now because I'm in like 2006, and they're talking about like this specific woodworking. They're talking about like, hey, all these different like woodworking sites and video player A versus video player B, and at the time, if you can remember that far back, like that technology was all over the place, right? Like some people were using these flash players where like all your video selection was in, and YouTube was a fairly new thing. Now, like almost all online video functions the same. You don't need a specific player for a specific type of thing. Are skills kind of that same stopgap measure where it's like, right now, we need a specific skill so you can get your skincare questions answered, but the industry as a whole is moving towards a much more cohesive thing? Or are you going to see that siloing and splintering like just exacerbate itself, where it's, and I'm asking you to like predict but are you going to see more cohesion? Are skills here to stay? Or is that a temporary solution to a problem that we're still trying to figure out?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know for sure. I think it's possible that it becomes a layer that goes away, but then I think about mobile apps, and I still use plenty of them. And there's still some things that I go to the mobile web for, and so on and so forth. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see. But I agree with you. It's not a great experience. We just talked in an interview about the biggest challenges for voice, and one of them is it's not especially natural for a consumer to go to a device like that and say, Alexa, open Eucerin skincare, just so I can get the information that I need. There's got to be a more natural way to do it. So I could see, as brands build a library of skills, that the technology will get to a point where it can understand a natural query. We'll say, all right, you're looking for skincare advice. Let me pipe you into the Eucerin skincare skill because it's got relevant content. So I could see something like that happening.
We know that most of these, the people in this room are suppliers, and they're calling on Walmart. If you're thinking about Google Home and where Google Home and the Walmart partnership is going with Google Home and everything they've been doing, one, where do you see that going? And two, knowing that most of these people are suppliers and having conversations with Walmart, what are the top 2 things that you would tell these people when they're having discussions with their buyers or teams in San Bruno of how to lead the way and have those discussions with Walmart?
Yeah, definitely. So I think we're headed towards an Amazon versus Walmart war in this space, or Amazon versus Google, but really Amazon versus Walmart. I think we're going to see those kind of emerge as the kind of winning platforms there. As far as the 2 things that I would do, so just to kind of emphasize what we've talked about, get your content right. So again, to echo the previous presentation, let's make sure that content is optimized for some of these voice queries, so that as people are looking for your products, they kind of rise to the top, and that people can easily buy them through Walmart and Google Express. And then the other I would say is let's start to play around with or test Google Assistant actions, whether you have an Amazon Alexa skill or not. Again, think about that analogy of Android and iOS, very similar for Alexa and Google Assistant, where you can take an experience that you've built in one place and skin it for the other platform in a relatively cost-effective way. All right. Good. Thank you very much.